How is everyone doing today? I'm so excited to have you guys on. And I wanted to come on and show you my face before I go back to the quick slide presentation I'm going to make. I am so excited to have you guys all here and formally welcome you to the CEO Brand Activism event, the call for courageous leadership when silence is complacency. So I'm really excited to have you join me today with Denny Post and James White, who are both amazing, amazing leaders and executives who are going to give you the ins and outs of what it's like being an executive at that level. They are both former CEOs of two mega brands and really give us some transparent, unfiltered insight into what that is like and what we need to do to prepare ourselves as well as our leaders in order to push forward and have real impact in this new time of social citizenship, right? And its significance. So I will get to Denny and James. They will introduce themselves in a moment, but I wanted to get back to this presentation really quickly because I want to make sure that everyone is aware of who is hosting this amazing event. And let me introduce myself. My name is Victoria Jen Rodriguez, and I am the founder and CEO of the Female Collaborative. And the Female Collaborative is a nonprofit organization, and we focus primarily on providing, okay, why is this moving? Here we go. We focus primarily on revolutionizing how women work and do business together. And we do that a number of different ways. But one of the main ways we do that is we put women who are seasoned, women who have value, women who have resources, who are just doing incredible things in rooms with other women who are doing exactly the same and creating opportunities for them to collaborate and make magic together. And our mission is simple, right? Providing women with the access, education, and collaborative support that they need to actualize their dreams on their terms. And one of the ways that we decided to play our part during this, Black Lives Matter movement and during this moment of intense social responsibility was to host these events, these round of events that focuses on activism and how you can use your brand, your influence to serve as an activist during this time and really influence in a way that matters most to us all. And so we are all about creating experiences where you guys are able to take off the mask, truly show up as yourself, and really digest content that is going to be shared with you in a way that is not safe, but brave. And I want to repeat that. We share content and experiences that do not create safe places, but create brave places so that we're able to have candid conversations and really move the needle ahead. We are a global network made up of progressive women who have the intent, again, to collaborate, educate, and provide access. We have a membership as well, and our members are seasoned professionals across a number of different industries. What makes the Female Collaborative unique and different from other female-led organizations is we are the only organization that actually provides opportunity for both entrepreneurs as well as those in the corporate sector to connect and collaborate. And we provide professional development opportunities as well as opportunities to grow your business, to share competitor intel, to build real bonds and lasting relationship with incredible people. Quick snapshot on our story. So we were founded in 2017, officially became a nonprofit in 2018, formalized our amazing board and advisory council in 2018. In 2019, we were recognized by Forbes, which was amazing moment for us. And we've consistently sold out our annual Women Who Roar Summit from 2017 to 2020. And you'll learn more about that in a minute. Our rapid growth. So we have an engaged network of 2,000 plus professionals and entrepreneurs. We have a social media reach of 20,000 across all of our platforms. We have 50 plus industries represented in our network, and we have 5 corporate sponsors committed, such as our amazing friends over at NBC Universal, Coca-Cola, Pizza Hut, and many, many more. So now I want to take this opportunity to show you guys a quick video, which gives you some more insight to us and what we do to really set the tone so you guys know what you're getting into today. So let me pull this up Here we go. All right, let me expand this out so you guys get the feel for this. Here we go. And I want to make sure. Here we go.
So the Female Collaborative is an organization that is dedicated to revolutionizing the way women work and do business together. So we are about empowering women to check the ego, check the BS at the door, and let's get out to business. Let's make some money. Let's create magic together. Let's create nonprofits. Let's create our legacies together and just check the nonsense at the door. Right? With the generational shift, with the most women serving in government right now is the time we are on fire.
You have to stay on top of your shit. If you come in here today, you came here for a reason. You met someone who you interacted with that you liked. You exchanged the card. You exchanged the handle. You exchanged the story. Then you leave here, and what do you do with it? You will never change until you are so dissatisfied that you are willing to suffer through what it takes to make those necessary changes. And some of you are not going to live your best life because you're not dissatisfied enough. You're way too comfortable because we live in a world that makes things very easy for us. And that's a good thing. Never take a blessing and make it be your curse.
Hey guys, Victoria Jen Rodriguez. I am the president and founder of the Female Collaborative. So we're here today because we have the extreme honor of donating some funds to Women Rising, which is a women's organization that's dedicated to helping women come out of domestic violence. Launch a campaign to go ahead and do that entitled Our Gives Back in partnership with Allison and the Female Collaborative for us to raise additional funds to give back to Women Rising. And to all of you and all the supporters for helping us and supporting that campaign, because today we were able to write a check. We're to building a partnership with them in the future. Allison and the Female Collaborative and myself have way more in store for you guys, so stay tuned.
All right. Let me stop sharing that. Bring this screen back up. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Hold on.
Yes.
Mr. Ritter? Yes. Ms. Maloof?
Yes.
Is that
Ms.
me?
Kelly?
Hold on one second.
Mr.
guys.
Bailey?
Yes.
I think
Ms.
my
Krause?
my YouTube is still playing. Okay, we stop that. Let's get that off there. There we go. All right. Let's get back to this screen here. Okay. So I want to go through some logistics with you guys. So I see a lot of action happening in the chat, which I love. Make sure that when you are sending things over through the chat that you are doing it to everyone, not just the panelists. I see a lot of comments going around and engagement, which I love. Just make sure you're sending it to panelists and attendees, because if not, only us, the panelists, myself, and the other two speakers will see it, and we're going to be speaking. So we're not going to be able to answer you guys or engage with you. So make sure you are using the opportunity to network with the other amazing people on this webinar by sending your messages to all the attendees, not only the panelists. Also, if you have a question you would like to answer the panel, make sure you are putting it into the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen versus the chat, because it will be difficult for us to find the questions in the chat because you guys are all going to be networking and engaging. So we want to make sure to get to those questions. So if you have a pressing question, make sure to put it in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. If your screen happens to refresh, make sure you, if your screen freezes, all you need to do is refresh it and you'll be back in business. You will get this presentation emailed to you post this event. So take your notes as we go, but there'll be a replay for you as well. If you like what you are hearing and seeing, please post on social media. We want to see you on social media. We want people to know that this is going on and that you are appreciating the content that you are seeing and our information is here. Also, I want to encourage everybody to make sure you wait until the end of this webinar. I know a lot of people, sometimes they head out early, but we have a really great surprise for everyone who joined us live today. So make sure you wait until the end, and trust me, it's a goodie. So you guys want to stay on until the end to take advantage of that surprise. All right, we are officially going to begin. So let's talk about why you guys are here. So you're here because gone are the days of passive leadership, right? You are ready to hold yourself and your leaders accountable. You understand that institutions need diverse voices to lead smart disruption efforts, including allies who want to use their influence but unsure how. And we're going to show you how to do that today. And lastly, your voice matters. If you don't believe it now. Your voice matters, and it's important for you to speak up and use your influence strategically, both in and outside the office. And we hope what you learned by today's conversation, you will feel more confident to do that. So let me stop this share. Without further ado, let me get our panelists on here. Here we go, making them a co-host so you guys can see them. All right, Denny and James, you guys are live with me. All right, let's see here. You guys should be on camera. I don't see you guys on camera. Wait, I see James.
There we go.
Denny. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi there.
Welcome. All right.
James.
Thank you to you.
Hey, Denny. Victoria?
Hello. I am so excited to have you guys on here. Let me actually fix this lighting while we get this started. There we go, so you guys can see me. Here we go. Now we're in business. All right, so let's start with a round of introductions. So Denny, please share who you are and the amazing woman you are with all of our attendees today.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am 42 years a professional. Before that, obviously education and quite a few years bartending. So I come from knowing what the front line is like. My career has been spent in advertising, consulting, and mostly food service. Up until last April of 2019, I was the CEO of Red Robin, which is a publicly traded chain restaurant, casual dining that focuses on serving families. I am currently serving on 2 public boards, one that went public actually last Friday. Very well. Vital Farms, which is the largest purveyor of pasture-raised eggs in the country and just a remarkable B Corp, as well as Wyndham Destinations, which is the largest vacation ownership company in the world and a fascinating business at a time like this. I am also a senior advisor to Reef Technology, and Reef is transforming urban parking lots into new ecosystems that serve the neighborhood. And it starts with food service. It includes last mile delivery, micro healthcare, all kinds of interesting new applications using underutilized assets, which are urban parking lots. Really interesting business that I've been proud to be a part of for the last few months. And in addition, I have always been an advocate for women. I had the honor of speaking at the Women Who Roar conference pre-COVID, I think one of my last trips. It seems like a lifetime ago now, but really loved being a part of it. James, I'm so happy to introduce you to this organization because it's a remarkable group of women with tremendous energy and bravery. And, now I think I know I'm ready to expand my advocacy to all diversity and really broaden my thoughts about how to bring the entire underserved population along with us.
Thank you, Denny. Thank you. And we are honored to have you. James, we are also very, very
Thank you.
honored to have been introduced to you and excited to have you here. So please introduce yourself to folks.
Super excited to be with this group. I'm James White. I'm a 30-year operating executive in a combination of the restaurant, supermarket, and consumer products industries. I was chairman and CEO at Jamba Juice for almost 8 years. Was an executive at a combination of Safeway stores, the Gillette Company, and Nestle Purina across that 30-year career. I've also sat on public and private company boards over the course of the last 20 years. I've sat on 13 public, private, and now startup company boards. I was chairman of 5 of those. And today I sit on 3 public company boards that include Medallia, which I just joined their board. And I think of particular note, their CEO made a commitment around the Black Lives Matter movement to increase their African-American representation from 1% to 13% over the course of the next 3 years. And they've put at risk 100% of their equity compensation for the leaders at that company. So I'm proud to join. That is my newest board. I sit on the board of Simply Good Foods, which are Quest Nutrition and the Atkins brands. And then I've sat on the board of Adtalem Global Education. And they've got an African-American woman who is chairman and CEO there, Lisa Wardell, who is just a fantastic executive and really has been one of the standout executives as we think about this moment in time. So thrilled to be on the call and look forward to engaging with the group tonight.
Yes. So thank you so much. If you guys haven't gathered already, we have 2 very esteemed and seasoned, powerful executives here today, who's going to give it to us straight with no chaser, which I love. And I know you guys are all looking forward to. So I want to start with the diversity between the different experiences the both of you have had as you've climbed the corporate ladder and achieved your executive positions. When we were prepping for this call, we called it the Black experience versus the white privilege experience. So James, let's start with you. If you can speak to your experience as a Black executive, and then we'll transition over to Denny.
Great.
And maybe I'll make a couple comments that'll really set the tone. I'll start with my first job out of college, and I'll take you to Springfield, Missouri, which is where my first job was out of college. I'm a graduate of the University of Missouri as an undergraduate. So if you can take yourself to 1983, 22 years of age, you get your first sales territory, and they actually have to take out of that first sales territory, which covered Southeast, Southwest Missouri and into Arkansas. They have to take out of your territory the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. They have to take that out of my sales territory.
Going in and out, James, or is it just me that I'm hearing that?
And again, I'll make this point again. That's my first job. At any point in my career. And I often describe it as when I've walked into many of my jobs, they start me at 0 and then I add points to show that I'm capable and credible to do the work, where my white colleagues start at 100 and they lose points. So those are things that you experience as an executive or a manager or an employee of color.
Okay, now this
Sorry,
might.
Jen. Victoria?
Yes, can you guys hear me? I don't know if this
I
is
can hear you, James.
on my side.
Vic,
Yes.
Are you guys having?
Yes, we can.
so Vic, a little bit. So we'll keep going. I think Jennifer, you're freezing at this point, but I'm gonna keep playing through. The other point I would make as an African American executive, we've all heard the Amy Cooper story where she's weaponized her whiteness and really marginalized the blackness of the birdwatcher in Central Park. What I would say is I've faced Amy Cooper or Karen or Peter or Jerry or Marla in the boardroom. I faced them as CEO. I faced them at every point in my career as an African American executive. So I'll pause there and let Denny share her story.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate that. You know, and I thought about as I came up, I was always so focused on the fact that there were so few women represented. And I started just about 4 years before you did. And I had some of those early experiences of being the only woman on the team frequently, the only one at the table, and having lovely things happen like being given about my career. I have been promoted because of my potential, certainly. But the best analogy I've got is, you know, I'm somebody who drives on a freeway in most neighborhoods 10 miles an hour over. And if I see a cop ahead, I don't even really tap the brakes. And it occurred to me that that's sort of emblematic of faster because I see very little risk in it. And I really thought about the need to stop and think about the risk of putting yourself forward when someone has had the experiences that you've had, James, or where they don't feel that they're being represented for their potential. I was given so many opportunities because of my potential. And I think now, as I look back, that I realized that I was so much more focused on bringing women along than I was, again, bringing a broader group along. So certainly there were a lot of times when I'm the only one at the table. And we see that over and over and over again, frequently now with others. And there's an opportunity for us to do more than perhaps I'd ever done in my career before. But I would say being a woman, at least a woman, a white woman, it gave me the opportunity to always walk into a room and be welcomed. I may have been the only one there, but I was always welcome. And it certainly is quite different than what you experienced.
All right, guys. So I think I'm back in business.
You are?
The storm took me for a ringer there. My internet's in and out, but I'm good now. So I missed a little bit of what James said, but I want to hop into this next question, which I think is a good segue. And it is this. It is, you know, a lot of people feel that this type of conversation has no business in corporate America. We should keep it separate, right? It's like church and state. You want to give an example. So what are your thoughts about that?
I'd make a couple. You go ahead, Denny.
I was going to say it absolutely belongs in corporate America because, you know, the business case is clear, and anybody who needs to make the case internally beyond what is, quote, nice to do or representative need only do a little Googling of Catalyst Research and some others to find out that diversity leads to better performance in companies. So it's a powerful and important part of your business to harness all the talent that you can possibly tap into. But you can't just make that commitment without being willing to really look at yourselves and say, what are we missing and why are we not bringing people along? And means you've got to have that conversation, tough conversation, and really understand what's systemic, what's intentional, and how to root it out. Would you agree, James?
I do. I think it's a discussion that is absolutely imperative. And I don't believe board CEOs or executives have an option anymore. I think we grew up in a time where it was a little bit optional. But as I look at it today, both the employees and your customers are actually going to demand that this conversation is going to be had. And both of those constituencies are actually holding management teams and boards to account. And one of the things I've seen in the last several months is we face this really intractable issue around structural and systemic racism, is that boards and management teams that lack diversity have no idea of how to deal with this moment that we sit in. I've received hundreds of phone calls from board members, CEOs that are actually all great people, very capable, but they find themselves sitting with management teams that are at a loss for how to deal with this current Black Lives Matter movement. And if you think about some of the industries that we've both worked in, 2/3 of the workforce are Black and brown people. And the leadership teams and the boards don't even come close to reflecting the people that actually do most of the frontline work in these industries. And the way I describe it is you've got leaders that are built for this moment and leaders that are absolutely not built for this moment. I've been working 30 years and I'm absolutely built to sit in the boardroom in this moment to have this conversation in the right way. And there's just lots of others that are not.
So let's talk about those that are not, because quite frankly,
you have to hear, Jen, Victoria, let me.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and you have to that point, when you say built for it, you've got to persevere. You have to stay through it, through the uncomfortable conversation. And, you know, it's one thing, and I know so many, and I love the fact that so many CEOs have written public letters. It was the really courageous ones who wrote the first ones in their industries. The ones who have followed on less so, but it'll be the real courageous ones who actually take action, turn that intention into making something happen. And stockholders increasingly are going to hold them accountable for that. Shareholders are.
So for CEOs who have a board that, let's say you have a courageous CEO or courageous leader, but their board does not support them on their ethics, what can they do? Because I find that there are a number of leaders who want to be courageous, who want to use their influence in a major way, but the folks who hold their salaries in tow or their futures in tow just don't get it. So what are your thoughts or advice for folks that are in that position?
I'd make a couple comments. I think you can either try to bring your board along, because you can have a board that is kind of uninformed and kind of uninspired around this current time. And as long as they don't stop you from doing the right thing, you move ahead, right? So that, you know, so that's one option. There are boards that are absolutely insistent that their CEOs and management teams don't take action or get involved in this current moment. And then you've got a choice of whether you're actually at the right company or not. And there are folks that have taken action. There is a colleague of mine that I went through a program at Stanford with. His name is David Epstein. And he actually resigned as CEO from his company. If you guys look on LinkedIn, consumers and employees are actually holding brands and companies and leaders accountable.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's often an indication of age in the boardroom, candidly. You know, and just as we often talk about the board, they're not our customer, they're not our consumer. They more than not do not represent our employee base. And again, to your point, James, is really pointing up what the upcoming generation of consumers, upcoming generation of employees, team members, who they represent, and bringing the board face to face with that to realize that if they continue to, excuse the expression, view everybody as a suburban housewife, we just heard that expression in the most recent conversation, they're really hopelessly out of touch. And, you know, and if nothing else, what opens a board's ears? Nothing like talking about profitability. And the business case is there, that there is greater profitability to be had from having diverse leadership organizations. And when you have diverse leaders, then frontline pipeline employees see that and they see opportunity. And it's really important to make that case to the board. Make the case about profitability, if nothing else.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because, you know, that business case has been out for quite some time. Yep. And even if that is the case, you still see a lack of diversity, a huge lack of diversity especially at the executive levels. So even though a senior leader executive makes the business case, or any type of leader makes a business case, shows there's profitability in diversification, but there's still nothing being done, what can be done at that point?
Well, again, the board is the CEO's boss, but they don't dictate how you execute. And if you can go forward and make the changes you need to make to create a more vital organization, it's hard for them to really get in your way. Where they may get in your way is about going public about it, making a big declaration. But even then, to James's point, there might be a point at which it just doesn't fit. But I would say it's the rare boardroom that's not having this conversation right now, because it is so much on everybody's minds and so present in our conversation in the States, around the world.
So let's talk about, because now you both being former CEOs, you can kind of now look back and say, I should have done this when I was in that position. Mm-hmm. So can the both of you speak to perhaps what are some mistakes or some things that you overlooked during your tenure as a CEO that if you focused on during your time, things perhaps would be different right now? James, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to start. I was actually quite active in driving for a culture that was more diverse and significantly more inclusive than many of the companies that were in the industry that I was in as CEO. I added diversity into my board. So the first couple women that joined the board during my tenure at Jamba happened on my watch. As I finished up at Jamba, we had 50% of the leadership team that would have been women and people of color, and down through 2 or 3 levels in the organization, we would have had at least 30%, persons of color and women. So incredibly diverse company. The one big thing I wish I would have been more forceful about would have been really strengthening the culture in the boardroom, because the diversity in the boardroom and how they think about this topic adds to the sustainability of any work that a CEO can do. I mean, one of the things that troubles me about the industry that Denny and I both share, even if we did fantastic work during our tenure, once we leave and there's another leader with a different headset, all that progress is wiped out in a year or so. And I've seen that happen across the industry that we sit in. So it starts in the boardroom having really an alignment around the importance of this work, because it's not optional. Where I've seen really phenomenal commitment to diversity and inclusion, I'll give 2 examples that happen to be Bay Area companies where I've watched these companies do succession through 2 or 3 leaders and in one really sad case, a good friend of mine, there was a untimely death, but the work actually continued because there was a more systemic commitment to this work. The two companies are Clorox, and they just appointed their first female CEO, but they've done a beautiful job over almost 15 years, and I'd highlight them. And then one of my favorite examples, and my favorite CEO ran Kaiser Permanente, Bernard Tyson, phenomenal CEO, chairman, had an untimely death earlier this year. And Kaiser is a $60-70 billion company. His successor was also, and Bernard was an African-American man, and his successor was also African-American. So that's not happening
Rare is that
in America. So, the deep work, sustainable over time, and the alignment of a fantastic board in both of those cases, and both of those boards were incredibly diverse. So that would be my best couple of examples, and that's the one thing I really wish I would have done a better job around.
Thanks, Denny.
Yeah. I think when I start thinking of mistakes, how long do we have? Lots of opportunities to learn. But, I think that the biggest for me was, again, that I over rotated to gender and didn't pay attention to the other elements of diversity the way I wish I had. And, I made great progress. We actually had a 50-50 board, 50% women, 50% men, 50-50 executive team when I was there. To James's point, when I left, things changed very rapidly, and it is not that representative anymore throughout the organization. But, I think the thing that I really wish that I had done is been more disciplined about measurement, because very early on, the folks who were in a position, and here's what's critical in a frontline organization like restaurants or retail, where so many women and people of color get started, hospitality, is that you start with an amazing pipeline of talent, but the first managerial step is where you see often the pipeline cut in half or more. And the reason is because everybody at that stage starts to reach for someone who looks a lot like them. And there's just this perpetuating culture of white men grabbing another white man to run the place. And, I wish I had paid much more attention to that front line, because that's where the folks who, start out and work with companies and provide that succession that James is talking about all the way through, not from hiring from the outside, but really building from the inside. I wish I'd paid more attention to that. I wish I had done more about measurement and really making people accountable for who they were bringing along. I think, to this day, I was pretty good about watching for patterns. If you saw a lot of turnover or problems with retention, I dig into that a little bit, and particularly if a man was having a hard time, generating any women leaders of individual units like restaurants, you could start to tell that he probably was not a very positive person when it came to that. But I didn't pay attention, again, to the broader questions of diversity and people of color. And I'm sure I would have found the same patterns had I done that. So patterns, measurement, more intent, and not just modeling, but actually speaking to it more vocally. I think I could have done more in that direction, and certainly will in my next opportunity. Really pay attention to that. Succession planning so often becomes reach outside to find the next person, when you ought to be building from the inside, just like James was talking about. And I think we could have done a much better job all the way down the ranks and paid a lot more attention.
Definitely.
And just one point to build on the point that Denny made. I mean, all the points that you made are really about building sustainable change. We've got systemic problems, and I wish I would have put in more systemic change to unbias all the HR processes, make more equitable all the processes. Some of that would be a lot more longer lasting if that was in place. It wouldn't be as easy to have a CEO change, and then when a new person sweeps in, everything changes if some of the changes were more systemic inside the organization.
It takes systems to undo systemic issues, right? So that's
Right.
exactly what we're talking about. It's putting in place the measurements, the tools, the things that really make a difference.
Let's drill down on that, because I think we're using a lot of buzzwords, and we need to be more intentional about the how. So what does successful systems, what does that look like? What does that mean? And what result would that bring about? So for example, if we're talking measurements, what exactly are we measuring? If we're talking accountability, how exactly are we keeping people accountable?
I'd
Well,
make
I
a
think
couple. You go ahead, Denny. You go.
I was going to say, I mean, if like any other measure or metric, you've got to have a baseline, got to know where you're starting from. So really understanding and making it a priority for every frontline leader or every leader in each organization or each part of department, whatever kind of company you're in, to be able to say what diversity is represented there, and know that, and then be accountable. And in accountability, I mean, be financially accountable in terms of their measurements and to their success, whether or not they move forward in who are they sponsoring, who are they bringing along, what allyship are they creating. So, I think, Victoria, for the other thing is to be very, very clear if you see a problem, to address it. Because if you allow it to continue, if you allow someone to continue to be a toxic member of the organization, I don't care how supposedly talented or important they are, one of the best things you can do is get rid of that toxic person and really make the case. Don't hide from it. But I would say the biggest thing on the measurement is you have to know where you're starting, and then you have to have the conversation not once, but every quarter, and certainly every year when you go through annual evaluations, but frequently, much more frequently. Who's being brought along? Who's being given opportunities? James?
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is if you look at just the HR processes, so who do we hire, and what do the slates look like? The best companies demand that there is a more diverse slating of candidates, and then that gives you a far greater opportunity of having diversity inside the company. How we evaluate people for promotion, making sure whatever the processes are, that we unbias those processes and practices. As we think about the prominent assignments that happen around a company, what process do we do to pick those people? Do we just pick people that look like us? And if there are processes and procedures that says we don't promote anybody into this job without there being a review by the HR department in some way or the CEO to evaluate. So those are several practical ways to think about just changing the system. And then the ultimate change in a system is tying expectations to compensation. So if I get compensated around the diversity of my team, the health and climate inside the organization I run, you now have my attention if a portion of my compensation is connected to it. And I go back to the board that I sit on where the CEO put 100% of their equity compensation in a technology company at risk to move the representation of African Americans at Medallia from 1% today to 3% the next year, 6% the following year, and ultimately to 13% to match the census.
I mean, that's profound.
Yeah.
That's a profound risk for them, and a really, I mean, talk about a statement. And obviously, and did that very publicly, right? Shared that with the entire organization.
If you go Google it, it's in a written statement, and it just happened 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, and not allowing excuses around that. Jen, I used to have a boss, and of course, again, somebody a male boss who used to ask, who has your handprint on their back, right? Who are you bringing along? And while that's a soft skill or a less formal kind of measurement, it's the kind of conversation you regularly want to have, because you want to be sure that the people who are traditionally in power are bringing others along and making sure they have the visibility that James was talking about, that they're getting put on the projects, so often, and really getting the sponsorship that allows them to be present. And so again, just asking that question, making that part of every conversation with someone, whether you're in the field or in your home office, talking to them and saying, what are you doing about this? Asking regularly. Not just making it a one and done letter or a once a year conversation. It's got to happen all the time if you're going to really create change. And asking them why not, if not. What's wrong? What are you missing?
Okay. So I want to transition, since we spoke about a little bit of the how and how to be a courageous leader, which is making difficult decisions and standing up, right, for what you believe in, even though everybody's against you on a particular idea, for example. Mm-hmm. James, you mentioned earlier that a lot of people are calling you from boards. A lot of CEOs are asking you kind of what to do. So how are those conversations going with those white CEOs? Like, are you finding yourself being very mindful of how you're speaking, or are you like, what is your tone? What is your style? Because a lot of people of color are being asked questions around, well, what do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? So how are you handling that to give folks some insights into some of the things that they can do?
Yeah, my style always, now and then, and maybe even more plain spoken today, is to be straightforward and call the issue as I see it, and probably even more forceful today than ever before, because I think we are in a different moment in time. So if you asked me if 6 months ago I was talking about structural and systemic racism with the force that I'm talking about it today, no. Was I talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the importance of that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But today we're really at a different place. So I'm not in a mode where my job is to make white people comfortable, either in the boardroom or as CEOs. That's not my job. But these are my friends, and I actually do want to be helpful. And I think we're at a moment of time for significant change. And I actually view this time to be very different. So as many places where I can have an impact, small or large, around change, and offer myself to be support or a resource, I'm very focused on that. And I'm very plain spoken, because this is not a hard issue. We just got to be committed to change.
And do you find that you are more courageous in having these conversations differently now because you're no longer in a formal role as a CEO, or is it the movement, or overall, is it a combination? And I ask that because a lot of folks feel nervous and fearful about how they are responding to things and how straightforward they are, because they are, their backs up against the wall, because they do have these positions, they do need these salaries, and they're not serving in an advisory capacity. Officially, they're an employee. So what brought about that change for you? And
it's not, for me, it's not a change. I just want to be clear. It's not a change for me. This has always been my work, and I've been allowed to do the work because I deliver results. So I'll back up a moment. So across my career, even when I was just a senior executive, I'll go back to my time at Nestle Purina. I was actually the sponsor for all the affinity groups, African American, Latinx, and women. One guy. But as long as I was doing excellent work, and that's a passion for me, it's like, go for it. Mm-hmm. So I've actually always done this. I've sat on the board of the Network of Executive Women, one of the few men. I actually helped bring the Network of Executive Women to Northern California. So I've always been really a champion for diversity. I've got I have daughters, and what I hope to be able to do is make the world a little bit better place. The only thing that has changed slightly, and my daughter has really, who's a millennial, 28 years of age, and she's working with me on a book project. And she really, 8 weeks ago, pressed me and said, "Hey, Dad, I've got a radical way to start our book." And the note she wrote went something like, this book is apolitical, is anti-racist, pro-Black, pro-LGBTQ, pro-all abilities, and really is for people that really want to address systemic racism in their corporations and truly move to a more inclusive, more diverse environment. So that actually had me to pause, but it actually has inspired me. So that's the one thing that has me playing even more intense were the words from my daughter, because actually my kids like our customers and employees. I mean, she's holding Dad to account.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing for me that is different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say things have changed a lot for me, Victoria. I mean, I really, and I think I would carry it back into a leadership role. So I don't think it's just because I'm not in that, because the conversations I'm having in boardrooms, one is, rather than being just an advocate, passionate, kind of wearing my advocacy, now what I have to do is really be authentic about how I've been revisiting my own attitudes. I mean, again, admitting to realizing again, so focused on my gender difference that I didn't really think about my white privilege, and being able to express that in a boardroom and have those conversations, not to call somebody else out, but to say what it's meant for me. Then it requires others to revisit their own thinking about it. And so I think the biggest thing that for me, a very big change, is that I can come along on that and really express what I've discovered about it. I share a mid-20-year-old son, and watching him watch the news and realizing that we can't be settling for progress made 50 years ago when we have so much that we need to make right now, making it urgent, modeling urgency, and actually having the courage to say, I've had to look inward and ask myself whether or not I've extended, and what privilege do I have relative to what so many others don't, and how do we address that? So I think that's really critical.
Thank you for that, and being vulnerable enough to share that, because I want to dig a little deeper on that, Denny, because I would love to understand what those conversations sound like that you're having with your counterparts, and how are they responding, so that people know how to handle themselves when they find themselves in positions of privilege, how they should be moving forward in those conversations.
Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to get past the defensiveness. The immediate reaction tends to be, look at how much progress we've got. And there's a lot of, and I'd love to hear James' comments on this at some point, but the immediate reaction is, we need to appoint a chief diversity officer. That'll do it. We don't have one, we need one. And how, and everybody's got the enterprise groups or the advocacy groups. But the question is to have not the defensive, to say, I'm not questioning what you've already done. I'm questioning how you're going to change what you're doing going forward, and really have the conversation as a board with each other to say, how do we support the CEO to that point? Because again, I'm in boardrooms right now. How do we support the CEO to make the courageous decisions around potential, to require and speak to his organization about the importance of diversity of slates? How do we make it a priority from the board and really push on that front? And I think, that's for me, it starts with looking inward, and then it really says, now, how do we work with this person to really support them, and not make it an issue of whether or not you've done enough. The question is, how are we going to do more? It's not enough. It's how do we do more? Because we've got to turn all this great intention into real action. And that's going to require a level of activity that most of us have not seen.
And do you find yourself, Denny, holding your peers accountable since this has started? And if so, how?
Yeah, and again, this is relatively new. This is one place where I really miss not being in rooms together, because you just can't have that, even that reach out, that touch, that I care about you. You're having to do it all through calls. So I am, and in fact, I'm in a conversation right now as part of governance around the fact that naming a new chief diversity officer is not at all. I'm not even sure I want to go there, because I think that is, and I'm curious to hear about James, about whether I don't want to make it feel like we've put that accountability in one seat. And when you choose and you go out, we'll have to go outside to hire, we'll bring somebody in. And the question is, how are we going to make them successful that we wouldn't have already done this before? And so I am pushing on that front. I just don't think that's the solution. I fear that that's more window dressing than it is real activity. And I'm stating that as clearly as I can, and not in a way that questions the intent or positive intent of the people I'm working with. I have a remarkable and wonderful, very experienced Hispanic advocate, Latino advocate on the board of one of my organizations, in fact, in 2 cases. And but I think he feels like he hasn't made enough progress. And so, saying, how do I ally with you and really do that? And the other thing is, some of these conversations can happen in a group, and often these conversations need to be one-to-one. And a lot of the hard board work comes from the conversations or the calls around it to say, let's talk about this one-to-one. There's greater chance for vulnerability if you're not feeling on stage sometimes. For a lot of people, not for me. It's not a problem. Obviously.
And
James, go ahead.
And I agree with Denny on this topic. I actually believe you can't delegate this leadership work to a chief diversity officer. I actually believe the CEO and the executives actually have to lead this work if they're committed to this work. And once there's leadership commitment, then I think it's actually fine to appoint a chief diversity officer, give him or her the right authority level, engage them in the right way to support the work. But this is work of the leader. I wrote an article around kind of the DEI playbook that I used at Jamba that was published in the Harvard Business Review here recently. And it's quite simple. This is a top-down, CEO-led activity. Is systems change, and it gets to one of the points I made earlier. You go through all the processes and systems, and you try to unbias those systems to really drive for systemic change.
So
and the bias can occur in some real subtle ways. I mean, I think this is one of the things that I've started to learn, particularly, is around not having standardized assessments. So if you have a large organization, Red Robin was 29,000 team members, right? There's no way I'm going to be able to look at all that. But what you can do is try to take out some of the subtle, the opportunity, the language that can often label somebody in a certain way, and try to make it much more objective. And then really push on those kinds of topics. But I agree, James, I think you do need somebody to keep it going, but you can't hand it off to somebody to make it happen. And I've seen it too often that they hand it off to HR or legal. Legal gets all worried about liability. HR, makes it one of those 14 things they've got to get done, along with compliance and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it just doesn't happen. So I think the CEO has to make it their accountability.
Well, 2 points. You can't delegate culture. The CEO, she has to lead culture. So you can't delegate culture. So you can't delegate this issue.
Mm-hmm. I love that line. You can't delegate culture.
It's a good one.
Yes, I had to write that one down. So I want to just remind folks to get your Q&As into the Q&A option box. I see some people already submitting some questions, because after this one, we're going to move into the open Q&A. Make sure to get it in there, because I know there's a lot of combo happening in the chat. So make sure to put those questions in there. And so my next question for the both of you is, how can leaders build emotional intelligence and really lead with empathy, which is a skill set that not many people have right now? So how can they build that up, and why is that so important to speaking about things like this and leading in that way? James, you can start.
Yeah, now I'm not positive how to answer the question, but I'll give you a couple suggestions. One of my favorite leadership books is called The Leadership Engine. The author of that book is Noel Tichy, and there are 2 or 3 principles in that book. One talks about leaders as teachers. The second point is around leaders taking developmental actions to make her team better. And kind of embedded in all of this is a point in and around kind of empathy. One of the points that I often make, and I made in my, my interview when I interviewed for the Jamba job. I mean, the point I make is this point. It almost doesn't matter if I had any 10 people on the planet, I can get more out of those 10 people than 9 out of 10 leaders on the planet. And here's the reason why. It's because I care. And you can't manage people as a group because you don't care how much I know until you know how much I care. I mean, that's my best example around the point of empathy. I manage people one-to-one. I'm helped, I think, in having this empathy based on my own humble beginnings. I'm the first member of my family to graduate from college, to have a professional job in business. So I actually see potential in every single person that I work with. And I'm trying to, I don't look for what Victoria or James can't do. I actually want to see what your strengths and passions are. And I always play your strengths and passions. And that's actually served me well across my career. But that would be my reaction to the question.
Okay.
Wow. Well, James, you just triggered something for me, which was when I was with Yum Brands for a number of years, when it was PepsiCo restaurants, then Tricon, and then ultimately became Yum Brands. And I had one of my bosses, whom I had great respect for, tell me that my biggest problem was that I cared about my people too much. And I remember taking that in, and I think back on it now, and the language was all wrong. It wasn't that I cared about my people too much. What he was calling me out on is I had a hard time separating making the tough calls sometimes. And I certainly got under that and got better at that, I believe, in making the tough calls around people, not allowing my caring to completely blind me to whether or not they were being effective. But I don't think you can care about your people too much, especially in a time like today. I mean, the stress is if you don't model from the top how to remain positive and caring and just to take people on as whole human beings in an environment like this, then the whole culture, to your point, will crumble. And it's really, really critical. I think the kind of stress that everybody's under right now requires a level of resilience. And Jen, or Victoria, I've spoken about. I keep calling you Jen. Love that middle name. It works. That a level of resilience, a willingness to be. To accept the facts about things, to stay strong, and to learn from things. And that a lot of that is being an empathic leader means really understanding what's going on with the people in your organization, and taking the time to truly listen. Empathy doesn't mean relating. A lot of times people will substitute it for, oh yeah, that's happened to me too. Well, that actually cuts off the conversation, right? What you have to ask is what's going on, and really listen. And care. And I think that's what gets you through stress, and acknowledge when people are coming through challenges. Give them room to share that. Make it safe for them to share that. And I think if you model that, I had somebody that when I left Red Robin, I actually got a note from his wife commenting that he had become how much she appreciated how much she'd seen him change. And a lot of it came from just being able to trust in being in an environment where he could share his whole self and not feel judged for that. So It's all related, but I think empathy is even more critical today than ever.
Mhm. Okay, I want to open it up to some Q&A. We have a message, question that came in for Denny. What kind of influence can you have now as a board member in terms of measurements and accountability? So we kind of answered that earlier, but I don't know if there's anything additional you want to add on to that.
Well, you do. You hold the ultimate, the purse strings, because the board is the CEO's boss, right? And so I happen to be on compensation committees in both cases. The compensation committee is the one that sets, what are the measurements that are going to achieve their outcomes with the CEO. And if you're clear with them, it has to flow downhill, because while the CEO has to ultimately be accountable, he has to in turn hold his people accountable to achieve what's going to make a difference for him or her. Unfortunately, I've got both hims. They're both great people, but both hims. But ultimately you set the tone at the top for what's going to matter. And if they bring forward weak, not putting themselves on the line, maybe not quite as much as the guy at Medallia, but certainly putting themselves on the line at all, or try to make excuses for it, you hold them accountable, and they in turn will have to hold their people accountable. James, would you agree?
I absolutely agree. And the only thing I'd add is this is going to become a bigger issue in the boardroom.
Yep.
Around, with us coming through COVID-19 and then facing this really critical issue around race in this country has galvanized a leadership discussion that is going to need to be around culture and all the human capital related and people related processes. And that happens actually in the boardroom. And there'll be an evaluation of both the CEO and the management team on these topics.
Well, and I also think it relates to governance in terms of broadening the structure of the board, to your point, the diversity of the board, and not being content to just, to bring on others who look just like me, and to really challenge us to be willing to expand and broaden the diversity of the board as well. That comes in governance. It's critical.
Next question is, when you have leaders who aren't demonstrating empathy or don't prioritize diversity, is there any level of managing up that can help change that?
Is there any level of managing up?
Yeah, so the question is, their leaders are not demonstrating empathy, they're not prioritizing diversity, so how can they manage up in that case?
That's a tough one. I mean, you can certainly try direct feedback with your boss, so you certainly can try that, and I assume that we've tried that. There is certainly HR, but one of the realities is you might be in the wrong place. And I'm not advocating in this environment for people to leave their jobs, but I think we need to just be, and I don't think I would have people, one of the things that I'd caution the group around, and I know this is a fearless group of women as a part of this collaborative, but I don't want Denny or my comments to get folks so fired up that they go out and lose a job in this environment. So I actually want to caution you to be smart, understand context, understand the environment that you're in, but sometimes you're in the wrong place, right? But you need to be, so I don't think any of us can be reckless in our advocacy, but none of us should live in a bad environment. So if it's a bad environment, I think there are actions that you should take.
Yeah, I think it's a question of, to your point, if it's a toxic culture, at some point that is the HR route where you've really got somebody who's actively undermining or acting in a way that is totally inappropriate. I do think that I learned a construct a long time ago. One is to not feel like you're the only one. So to make sure to talk with others and kind of get that power, the power of a few having a point of view and representing not just yourself, but the impact that it's having on the culture, on the organization, saying I've talked with some others, and also giving back to empathy. If you're giving feedback up to a leader, I learned a long time ago, and that if you offer what you appreciate about them, and then how they could be more effective, it's a really good way to open up ears and hearts, and to say, it's an old tool, but is to say, I really appreciate about you is that you do, but you could be even more effective if you'd stop and think a little more around this, or I've noticed that there might be some opportunities, and actually offer yourself up as somebody who is there for them to talk to, because again, these are difficult times, and almost positioning yourself. So when I think of managing up, I think of it as kind of manipulative. I don't mean that, but you're there to grow your people, you're there to grow your peers, and you're there to make your managements even stronger. And I think you actually offer yourself up as someone who can help them be even more effective. Point it that way, not accusatory, but how can I help you be more effective? This is a tough time, and but I would go solo, but I would represent a broader voice, and then I would really position myself as somebody who wants them to be successful and be even more effective in this very challenging time. And hopefully you can open up some ears.
Let's see, what's the next question that came out? I think we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but somebody asked, what are some companies that you find have strong D&I teams that care about culture, and why?
Yikes. James?
Yeah, I don't know that I would describe D&I teams. There are strong company cultures that I absolutely love. And I mentioned Clorox. I mentioned Kaiser. I love the work being done at Adtalem Global Education by their CEO, Lisa Wardell. But all of those companies, the great work is led by the CEO. They may or may not have a strong D&I resource, but they've got an embedded, inclusive nature to the company, which I think is more important than a function or a department. This is really about how, people kind of live their culture for me. So when it starts with the CEO, so Lisa Wardell at Adtalem Global Education, if you Googled her, she's on CNBC talking about this work inside her company, but also educating her peers in the end. So she's somebody who is fearless. She's in the CEO job, chairman and CEO. And she's put out toolkits and tools inside her company, and she shared actually that stuff publicly. So, those would be my three examples, and they all start at the top. All three of those have very diverse boards. And I think that's one of the common through lines on some of these companies that do a great job at this work.
I can think of two companies. They're very different, totally different in scale, size, and history. The one that immediately leapt to mind, it's a little company, but check them out, is a little company called the And Pizza, which is a growing one on the East Coast. The founder there has just kind of built advocacy. The team has always been called the Tribe. There's a whole culture there around frontline folks and what matters to them. And for example, he's closing down his restaurants, his stores on election day this year, so that all of his team members can participate, whether they volunteer or go. That's a bold move. It's hard for a really big company to pull something like that off when, one day out of 365 can mean whether or not you hit your earnings. But it's a great kind of statement to say how much I care about you, and I care about you being part of our community. So that's a small example. I think on the other extreme, I think Starbucks takes more, they take more slings and arrows than they probably deserve in lots of cases. They're such a obviously an international company, a global company, but I know for a fact that they have really dug under, particularly around pay equity for women in a very, very active way. And I think the organization, obviously with Roz Brewer at the top and and some very, very strong, Lucy Helm, who heads up their HR teams. They take their share of flack, but I think they actually do a hell of a great job of focusing on their culture and the diversity in their organization.
Thank you. I have let's see, what is this question? This question is, what organizations or resources would you suggest to help an executive team take the first formal steps? Their company has 20,000 plus employees, mostly service workers.
Wow.
I think their executive team should take.
Well, there's a lot of going on around, the unconscious bias training that's going on, which, again, if it just stops there, you don't get anywhere with it, but it certainly is helpful. And there are many great organizations out there that provide really strong, it helps at the top, look at yourselves and understand that we all carry these unconscious biases that we need to address. But you have to push beyond that. But I'd say that's a good first step. If the organization hasn't at least done that, and they have to do it at the top, model at the top, and have that opening up that tough conversation about biases. I think that's one approach. It's fairly rote, but I think it's important.
Yeah, two thoughts would be two organizations. One that Denny was the interim CEO and was the chairman of, the Women's Food Service Forum for a hospitality related organization, has tools and resources that would be helpful. And also the Multicultural Hospitality Organization, their CEO is Jerry Lopez, who is in this space doing great work and has been doing it for 2 or 3 decades. Those are two organizations. Jerry is a friend and a phenomenal leader in an industry that has to do much better in terms of the diversity, both in the boardroom and the C-suite moving forward. And that's the industry we both come from.
Yeah, you're right. There absolutely is. And I'm going to give you a hard time because Jerry Lopez is also a terrific guy, but Jerry Fernandez is the one who runs.
Sorry.
Culture.
Yeah. All right.
I had to give you a hard time about that one. But
you got me. That's okay.
But they're actually both fabulous people. I know them both. They're both terrific people.
No, you're right. You got me.
Yeah. I think again, there's
Jerry will kill me.
Yeah, network of executive women as well. Again, one that you've been very involved with. There are resources out there, and it need not be Accenture or Deloitte to pull this off. There are a lot of great smaller organizations. Pope Consulting's another one. A lot of great organizations out there that help.
Yes.
Owned by a woman, by the way.
Yes. I love that. And, let me just do a little plug here. So outside of the Female Collaborative, I have a consultancy that I run that focuses on talent management. So 15 plus years in corporate, became an entrepreneur, am a certified MWB, and I work with institutions around inclusion and diversity strategy, ERG frameworks, measurements, KPIs, unconscious bias training, all of that. So feel free to reach out to me. Happy to help. I want to ask.
Way to go. Put your hand up.
That's right.
That's it. Put your hand up.
I want to ask you both, what, in your opinion, is an impactful ally? James, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think for me, an impactful ally is somebody who is committed to helping build an inclusive culture and making sure that we can create an unbiased environment inside the organization. And I think there are small and large ways, depending on the power that the ally has, to be helpful. It could be just a listening ear around a challenge or a problem or an opportunity. It could be as a mentor or a sponsor. If the ally sits in that kind of role or responsibility inside the company, or it could be somebody that might also be able to advocate to change the culture or the environment. Those are the couple thoughts that come to mind for me.
I think an impactful ally is someone who's got courage to put themselves on the line to help you move forward. And that's where the real impact happens.
In real allyship.
Yep.
All
True.
right, I love that. So before we conclude, because I don't see any other more questions, I did want to give out the surprise to everybody who has stayed on. And it is, let me just pull this up real quickly and then we'll do final closing remarks. I want to make sure to get this out to folks. Okay, here it is. So this is what you get. So we're offering a 90-day free membership to the Female Collaborative, so that you guys are able to take advantage of all the resources. So for everyone who joined us live, you will get a link after you provide us feedback on our most recent LinkedIn post, which will be the flyer for this event. So you'll want to go on LinkedIn at the Female Collaborative, leave your feedback on that post so that we're able to send you the link so that you are able to take advantage of the 90-day free membership to the Female Collaborative, just to share some of the resources and access that you get. As a member, you have access to all of our members' direct contact information, not only emails. You also have a portal full of resources there for you to take advantage of. We've got white papers, we've got webinar replays, master classes, executive sessions. We also have an exclusive Facebook group where on a daily basis, women are sharing ideas, they're picking back, they're starting business together out of that group. It is amazing stuff going down there. So you also get that. And then you also get events that are exclusive to members as well, both in person and virtual. Denny is actually a member of ours and we love to have her, just to give you a sense of the type of women that are involved. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity. We wanted to thank you guys for joining us. So we're offering you that 90-day free membership. And also Jennifer is in the chat, who is a member of the team. She's sharing the link right now in there, but make sure you leave your feedback on that LinkedIn post. All right, so great conversation. I love the transparency and I appreciate both of you. Any final remarks from the both of you?
I just want to thank you. I want to thank James for agreeing to partner with me on this. And I want to say, challenge myself and everyone on this call to make sure they don't leave this earth without having really made a difference, because we only get so much time to create change, and now is the time to make that change happen. So step out there and stay active. Don't settle. Do not settle.
And I enjoyed the conversation with my great friend Denny. So I was glad for the invite. Victoria, you were a gracious host. Love the work you guys are doing and keep it up. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. We'll be in your inbox soon. Thank you, James and Denny. Appreciate you so much. Thank you. Have a great
Very
day,
much.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.